Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about one of my big pet peeves, and that is when people come in and they talk about some sort of whole food being horrible or being bad for people or causing early death or obesity or anything else among athletic populations. And it seems like every time you do a video discussing the merits of whole milk for lifters, or eggs for lifters, or fruit, or potatoes, or anything else, that all of these ignoramuses come in and they make statements about how it's negative for them. And there's some problems with this. First of all, nobody is becoming obese or getting heart disease anywhere because they're consuming too many whole foods and being physically active. Okay, that is not what causes these problems. And we'll get into epidemiology and the problem of this in a minute. Okay, this is not the reason people have problems. In fact, when you bring up the milk thing, you can argue all you want that certain components of milk in large amounts, that some of those individual components in epidemiology or in certain blood work are described as having negative effects. But when they are in milk itself, it's not the same thing. I'll give you a perfect example. And this is why we talk about whole foods versus breaking them down. Even when you look at blood work of people who consume very large amounts of butter, right? A lot of times their LDL cholesterol will be elevated. Okay, a lot of doctors note this, and I know doctors even who are in kind of the fitness world and lifting world have noted this. But if people consume similar amounts of milk fat from whole milk, you don't see the same blood work as if they had just done the butter. Now people say that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. How could that be? They're still getting the butter. Well, this is what we notice when we consume some of these individual components. It doesn't always produce the same effect on your blood work as when you consume it in the whole food. Because you need to remember, everything that you eat affects you. It's in the context of the entirety of your diet. But I mean, the butter versus whole milk is one that has been noted in blood work, like by individual doctors. It's not the milk fat per se that's the problem in the matrix of the whole milk. When it has a lot of other things with it that give you other benefits, it's when you extract it, isolate it, make this refined product that it seems to, when it consumed large amounts, have those issues. All right, we could talk about fructose in the same light. Hey, people who consume and exceed 50 grams of fructose a day, whether it's in the form of sucrose, table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, we see certain blood markers that are different. These again in sedentary populations. If someone consumes large amounts of fruit and approaches that similar level of fructose, you don't see the exact same effects. Right? Hopefully this is getting through to people. Yes, they're still consuming the same amount of fructose. And I think this is the problem we run into when we start saying, oh, track saturated fat. Well, which type of saturated fat? They're not all the same. And are you talking about saturated fat that you've extracted and concentrated, like coconut oil or butter? Which, by the way, I don't believe coconut oil is actually a health food. It's my opinion. And it's not a whole food, so in the context of this discussion, that perfectly fits. But when you take fruit, for example, even when it creates a fructose load that should be on the high side, you don't see people's triglycerides shoot through the roof. You don't see their liver values and fatty liver start to appear. It's hard to eat enough fruit to cause health problems. Hey, the thing that we deal with there is, though, when you compare that to similar amounts of fructose found in a refined sugar, you get a different effect on the blood work. Therefore, it's not the same thing. It's not the individual ingredient that's the problem. It actually seems to be is when we just consume large amounts of refined foods of any type that aren't whole foods that we start to see problems. Whether it's refined fructose, refined fats, therein lies our issue. Now here's our thing. We could argue all we want about cancer rates in dairy. Well, the meta-analysis says it doesn't exist. But what we do know about milk, and again, this is stuff I've discussed in the past, look at studies on whole milk and muscle protein synthesis. I had a guy actually come in and say, I can't find this. If I looked up performance, I never use the word performance because you can't use the right words. You can't find the studies. Muscle protein synthesis. or whole milk and hydration in athletes, you'll be shocked at how phenomenal it is. I'll go so far as to say that whole milk is the single best food that an athlete can be consuming based upon the data. Now here's our other issue we run into with these things. People will try to pull epidemiology of sedentary populations. Let me give you a hint. If you're sedentary and not athletic, you're going to die much younger potentially. You're going to have worse health markers. You're going to have more cancer, more heart disease, more diabetes, more osteoporosis, more Alzheimer's, more dementia. This is not even subject to debate. That's not a controversial statement. Fully supported by the data. The negative effects of even foods are offset through vigorous training. Do they remove them completely? No. Do they offset them and shift the bar? Yes. So here's our problem. You'll have people who will pull epidemiology. They'll pull epidemiology from sedentary populations and try to apply it to people who train 5, 6, 7 hours per week. Okay, more athletic populations. You realize that doesn't work, right? Because number one, all of these health problems that we associate with foods, even in the epidemiology, the mere act of training regularly dramatically reduces your risks of them. And when an athlete consumes the same food, even the more refined ones, that the sedentary person does, you don't see the same degree of change in their blood work. You don't see it. And I think people make the big mistake. I will talk again about, say, having young lifters drink up to a gallon of milk to gain weight. They're not getting fat. My guys doing that don't get fat. And again, we're not talking fat in the bodybuilding world. We're talking fat compared to athletes, athletic populations, healthy people. Because, again, looking at me in these pictures, I'll have the same bodybuilding people will call me fat. No average person is looking at me and thinking this is a fat guy. They're thinking, wow, this dude is in his 40s. Guy's squatting over 500 pounds, deadlifting over 600 pounds. He's big, he's jacked. They're not seeing fat. So you guys need perspective there. Number two, fat power lifters and fat strength athletes, has anyone ever looked at their diets? I'm going to ask you guys a very simple question. Anyone who thinks that fat power lifters are getting big and fat, the truly fat ones and strongmen, do you think they're getting big and fat because they're eating whole foods? You think they got there from drinking milk or eating bananas or potatoes? Do you really think that? If you think that that's actually what happened, you have never looked at their diets. You are completely ignorant. Okay, you take someone like Ray Williams. You think Ray Williams got that big and fat by drinking milk? Have you ever heard an interview of what he eats? The guy basically lives on cornbread and buttermilk. Buttermilk is highly refined. Basically just eats giant piles of cornbread, which is, again, very refined to some extent, dipping it in buttermilk all day. Like 10,000 calories a day of that stuff. Okay, he's not getting there by drinking a gallon of milk. A gallon of milk only has 2,400 calories. I hope most of you realize that at around 2 gallons of milk a day, you probably wouldn't be able to consume anything else, and you're probably going to be running into issues of brain swelling and other things. All right, 2 gallons of milk is getting excessive in terms of electrolyte intake, food volume, liquid volume. Like most people would be vomiting before they did that. Okay, you're not doing 2 gallons of milk. You do realize 2 gallons of milk, if that's what that guy drank every day, he would not be able to maintain his weight. That guy would lose 100 pounds. That guy would lose 100 pounds within 2 years if he tried to drink just 2 gallons of milk a day. Perspective. Go look at what a lot of these other bigger, fatter strength athletes eat, because of the food intake that they have to be at the body weight they're at. They can't do it with whole foods. It's impossible. All right, none of these guys are getting there by eating steak and potatoes. You can't eat 10,000 or 12,000 calories of steak and potatoes a day. Well, that's what a lot of these bigger, fatter guys you're thinking of are consuming. 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 calories a day. You realize 10 pounds of potatoes every day with 2 pounds of steak isn't even close to that. Right? These guys aren't getting fat from steak and potatoes. They're eating piles of junk food, refined food, tons of refined grains, oils. Right? They're eating a junk food diet to some degree to get there. They're not getting there because they ate too many bananas or too many potatoes or too much milk or too much steak. People have completely lost the plot. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.